Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Wednesday Palaver. And today we're going to discuss something very special. Today we're going to be discussing the state of security or insecurity in Ghana with reference to the 2020 elections. And we have in the studio with us somebody who is very, very special. Somebody who has been discussing these issues, who has been a peace builder. He's worked in the NGO field for some time, and now he works within the UN, as an advisor on peace. He's not an employee of the UN, but he works within the UN system as an advisor on peace. He will be talking to us about this subject, and he'll be speaking for about 20 to 25 minutes, and thereafter we'll go to our Facebook page and we'll go to the WhatsApp platform and take messages from there. And then we'll come back to the studio for questions and comments, and then he will round up for us. It is my very, very, very special privilege to introduce Mr. Emmanuel Bombande. Sir, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Senior Comrade Kwesi Pratt. Good evening to, first of all, our audience, to our viewers of Pan-African television. Accept my warmest compliments. And I would always say I appreciate so much the type of innovative programs in Pan-African television that educates, not just educates, but also empowers. This evening, the topic before us for reflection and discussion, in my view, is crucial. It's very important. Let me put it this way. It is not possible to imagine a future of the Republic of Ghana, our beloved country, in which we look at the welfare, the well-being, the prosperity of all our citizens, when we allow the current state of insecurity to further deteriorate and worsen. It is very, very important for all of us to underline that it does not matter what we have in terms of the promises of the future. If it is not built on the type of security that can be sustainable, but also assuring to the citizenry that their well-being, their protection, and personal safety is guaranteed, everything else that we seek to do would simply collapse. My dear friends, when I talk about the current state of insecurity, which is pervasive and which every Ghanaian acknowledges, you look at it at the level of violent crime, you look at it in terms of the consequential insecurity that emerges out of violent crime, attacks. But keep in mind that when we are talking about insecurity, as we follow it every day now in the media, we are talking about the first level of insecurity, which we see as a direct attack. We call it the physical violence. It is the type of direct physical violence in which, when we hear about killings, when we hear about murders, it shocks us. It traumatizes us. And because of the trauma as a people, we are mobilized to talk about the incidents of attack, the incidents of robbery. But we do not go deep enough to appreciate why this type of insecurity is occurring. And that is why the immediate consequence of insecurity is what we see that is visible. That is what I describe as the physical attacks. That is what we all see happening around us. And you can put in the examples of the very recent times. We have the family of Honorable Eko Hayford in our thoughts and prayers, and may he rest in peace. But the life that God gave each and every one of us in his own image can be so if you'd call it, cruelly taken away without due cause to the value of such human life. So let me put it this way, that none of the insecurity I've described, none of the situations of insecurity which I have just described as physical and as direct can happen when it is not linked to a second level of insecurity. And that second level is what we probably do not talk about, but it is more deadly. And so I would want to propose that in the 20 minutes I have, I will talk and interconnect these two levels if we are to appreciate the current insecurity, which then informs us how do we go forward when we want to address the type of insecurity we are talking about. In other words, I'm talking about the visible, direct, physical insecurity to be mutually reinforcing to a second level which is invisible. And that second level of insecurity is what we call structural insecurity or structural violence. The reason why it is structural is because it's systemic. It is rooted. Imagine in your compound, in your house, in your neighborhood, there is, let's take a tree that has grown to a point in which you no longer see the usefulness of the tree because its roots are even going into the foundations of buildings, and you want to get rid of the tree. You can choose to get a saw and cut it maybe down below and lower at the stem level and leave it that way because you no longer see the branches, you no longer see the stem. But would you have dealt comprehensively with that tree if you wanted to get rid of it? No. If you wanted to get rid of that tree holistically, what do you have to do? You have to uproot it. Because it is the root that gives source to the life of that tree. And if you want to get rid of that tree because it has become an inconvenience and you do not uproot it, you have not done anything. But none of us admires a tree because we are able to see the roots. We admire a tree by its beautiful green leaves, and some trees have beautiful flowers, and even the stem can be beautiful for us to be able to admire. And that is why our human capacity must go beyond what is the visible, what is the admirable, to what is the invisible. But the moment you begin to talk about what is the invisible, you are talking about going down the root. You are talking about going below what is not visible. It's important to then begin to appreciate it at this level. So first of all, in addressing these influential or mutually influential two levels of insecurity, first, we must notice that our challenge in Ghana has always been the disjointed coordination of security and security governance. It's important that whilst every elected government with a mandate of 4 years provides political oversight for the effective coordination of security, it does not mean that political oversight is to throw away anything that we had that was working in order to start from a new policy that sometimes cannot be sustainable. And I would explain myself. We need, for example, to work progressively at how we increase police numbers so that we gradually get to that international standard of 1 police officer to 500 civilians. And I don't need to take some of my time to explain policing in itself as civilian. And that is why it is the duty of the police to interact with us civilians, because we regard them also as civilian, except that they are at the forefront of law enforcement. But if I take this example, I can make a sweeping statement such as increase police numbers. But is it not in our pervasive psyche in Ghana that people don't have confidence even in the way we recruit our police officers? Because if you want to increase police numbers, it invariably says that you have to recruit. But how do we recruit? It has increasingly become opaque. In fact, some of the publicities in the daily newspapers to announce recruitment is now riddled and caught in stories of either denial or confirmation. So sometimes you read a story and then you would have a counter story that it is fake. The police have never issued such recruitment notice. Or when they are recruiting, people are not sure whether it was publicized. And in that regard, a fundamental challenge arises. If the recruitment into the police service is opaque, it is not transparent, what it does not carry the people along. And if it does not carry the people along, people begin to lose confidence even in the way the police service is structured and formed. And it includes then the training, and it includes the professionalization of the police. And so even if we were to have one police officer to 500 civilian Ghanaians, but we don't have confidence and trust in how these police were recruited and trained, it does not mean we would have improved our security environment. And challenge me if I'm saying anything that you have not heard in the public space. Is it not true that recruitment is seen now as a reward to party loyalty? And for that matter, the promise of party support in exchange for recruitment into the police and associated security agencies. When you have a country in which we get to that level of suspicion, what then happens is when you see the men and women in uniform, your understanding of your role begins to change. And it changes because of the doubt implanted in you about how they got there. Because you are looking at them and you are looking at other people you thought were equally qualified, but they have not been recruited. And so you begin to wonder, what is it that is going on wrong? Secondly, we cannot provide a knee-jerk reaction to the incidences of insecurity and begin to describe that as responding to improve the security environment. So the immediate deployment, as we heard it today, or was it yesterday, of 200 police officers to protect our members of parliament is such a good example of a knee-jerk reaction. We are not able, as we sit down in this room, to determine whether the level of threat in insecurity is targeted to a specific group of people who are members of parliament. What we know is that it is pervasive in our environment. If you happen to be in the wrong place and at the wrong time, you could be a victim. Now, our confidence of improving a security environment is whether the effort can be sustainable. So you and I begin to feel assured that when we walk out of this studio, our protection, just as the protection of every Ghanaian, is important. If we can have that sense of security, we don't need to worry about our members of parliament because they will be equally protected and they will equally feel safe. But if they have a direct protection, but the rest of us feel that the environment is so insecure that we are not able to live our daily lives with the confidence of feeling secure and feeling protected, even they who are provided police protection will begin to feel insecure, even if they don't talk about it. So it's rather in their interest as the representative of the people to insist on how the security environment is good for everybody and not necessarily for they alone. But this should not be confused with the protection of what we call specialized groups of people within society, which then happens for various reasons. And I have a very short story to share at my personal level. You know that in 2016, President Mahama invited me. At that time, I was already working in the UN office for West Africa and the Sahel. After I left an organization I founded and worked hard. And I thought that after doing that work for 15 years, if I continue in ONEP, people begin to associate ONEP with me. And the institutional credibility that we want begins to move away from the institution and into the individual. And this is typical of civil society organizations. And I took the decision to move. And whilst I was already in the UN, President Mahama wanted me to come and support him as Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. So after going through the parliamentary vetting and all the procedures, he swore me into office. It was a time my boss, Honorable Hannah Tete, who is now the special representative of the Secretary General of the UN to the African Union, was very busy with quite a lot of things that were happening at the time, and also preparing to secure her seat in her constituency in Efutu West. When I started working, I was overwhelmed with quite a lot of issues. But then a police officer reported and introduced himself to have been sent to me, and he will be my police protection. So I sat down and had a very good discussion about, but this Emmanuel Bombande, who is known everywhere, what is it that has suddenly changed that I will need police protection? And that my understanding was that because of my background and where I came from, and because I was not in the front line of what we would call our politics, I was secure enough to continue to do what I was doing in order to earn confidence from the people and even be more effective. And our conversation ended. After 2 weeks, the director of operations at the police headquarters was at my office. My secretary literally walked into my office and said, "Did you make an appointment with director of police operations?" And I did not know, because it's not in, I've not locked it into your schedules. I said, "No, I did not make such an appointment." And then she told me, "Well, the director of police operations is wanting to see you." I said, "Sure, let him come in." He came in, and I was trying to wave him to the seat. You know, in the foreign ministry, when you have visitors, it's about diplomacy. The seat must be comfortable enough so that you can sit and share ideas. He stood at attention and saluted me, and he said he did not come on a courtesy call, and so he cannot sit down. I said, "What did you come?" That he has come with a directive. I no longer own myself, and I need to be provided security. Otherwise, if something happened to me, it will be the entire police service that will take the blame. At that time, I had very little to argue about. So we then negotiated, and without taking that story too long, the outcome was that, okay, I accept, but he shouldn't wear police uniform. He should wear, and that as much as possible, my anxiety would be that would be met if he's not carrying weapons. And the whole thing went about, I cannot dictate how. But anyway, that is how it ended. And I had a gentleman, he was very nice. He wore civilian clothes throughout, and I went with him. But the point I'm trying to make out of this story is that your feeling of security is more psychological than physical. It's more about your capacity to assess the trust levels that people have in you, even if you are a public official. And that is what is pertaining to all of us, that we feel secure truly because we understand that we belong to one another. And so this brings me to my second layer before I conclude. Our understanding of security, as I said, when it is limited only to the physical or to the direct, is not enough. It has to also go deeper to the invisible. And what is that invisible layer? I talked about the systemic level, I talked about the structural level. Security at this level must be holistic. And that is why you cannot talk about security now only in terms of the police and its associated security agencies. You must look at it holistically as law enforcement. The moment you begin to talk about law enforcement, you are talking about the judiciary. So that the executive is in charge of policy, but the judiciary is in charge of interpreting what crime has been committed and what sanctions must be meted out. So, if you look at it at that level, not only is it psychologically damaging, but it's also demoralizing when the judiciary is not able to perform as it is expected. And when the society begins to lose confidence that the judiciary is not performing because it treats different people differently. For example, if you are a very wealthy young woman or a very wealthy young man, and you are highly politically connected, and you are even a public official, if the law treats you differently because of that wealth and because of that power, but anybody we consider to be ordinary, the law clamps on that person and without any sense of mercy, justice must be applied fully, you cannot have security that can be sustainable. Because the resentment in society will begin to tell, and that becomes a poison in the environment, and that poison destroys, and that destruction cannot make the effect or not. What then happens is that we create a new culture of insecurity, because a norm that should not be tolerated in society becomes acceptable. And what now becomes acceptable is that there is a culture of impunity that has gradually permeated your security system. And because law enforcement cannot deal with it, it becomes pervasive. The greatest threat to our security in Ghana is that for many of the months that went on, we sat down and allowed vigilantism to permeate our security space. And that vigilantism has made it impossible for some people to be held to account. And here, let me make a quick observation. It's not the laws that we pass that deal with insecurity. It is how those laws are implemented. But to implement, you need what I call the political will. And political will comes with goodwill. But together with that also comes the courage. For some of you in the media, and why is my brother Kwesi Pratt a distinguishing personnel in the eyes of every Ghanaian? It's not because he's good at journalism, but he does journalism with courage. And that courage says, I look at you as a Ghanaian and I don't care where you come from. And the truth will be interpreted. And if it happens to fall in line with you, fair enough. If it is not, and that's why in a lot of his contributions, he always frames the question as an appreciative inquiry. Disagree with me if what I'm saying is wrong. Challenge me. And he's happy to hear the feedback. So, when the rule of law is not applied equitably and with fairness to everybody, then the impression is that law enforcement is choosing and picking who then should be sanctioned. You cannot have enough police people to manage that environment in which we feel that there is no equity in security. And so we need to address what I call the structural injustices. They are not visible, they are the root. But if you don't do that, you don't give credibility to the physical, which is the role of the police. And to ensure equity and inclusion, we must look at all of us as a people. You see, I was joking with a friend from the other side of the political divide, because since I served in office, everybody knows I'm NDC. I told him, in 2016, one of your friends was very good at talking about inclusion. And he said, if in Flagstaff House, the president is a Christian, the vice president should be a Muslim. So I said, fantastic. You know, your logic was great. So now I want to put it to you. Women are 51% of the population. So we've arrived at the point in 2020 when the president is a man, the vice president should be a woman. And he disagreed with me. I said, but is that not the logic of inclusion? The only difference here is that I'm bringing inclusion to the level of gender. And in that gender inclusion, the percentage distribution is even giving more credence. And that is why how we also play politics is important. If we take security issues to become political jokes, then we pay the price. Security issues must have continuation regardless of who is in office. What we need to address, I have said, is the structure. And how do we do that? We need to be responsible and disciplined, particularly those of us who have a voice, those of us who served in public office, and those of us who continue to present ourselves for election must have this in mind. And before I conclude, I want to give a quick little scenario here. Recently, and to be fair to this audience and to Pan-African television, I wouldn't mention names. A politician went to my home area and actually went beyond Boku, where I come from, to Pusiga, to pay homage to my late auntie, Hawa Yakubu. And for those of you who do not know, through my grandmother, I have a long distance relationship with Hawa Yakubu. And so I was very close to her, and I saw her as a woman who inspired. This politician went to Pusiga And according to her own interview, to pay homage to a woman who had integrity and was known as the Iron Lady. I hope she was inspired. I hope she truly left with a new spirit of what it means as a leader to always talk inclusion rather than exclusion. Because this same politician is noted to have said, if you come from the north, keep in mind that were it not for free education, you'll be a herdsman. In one sentence, this politician denigrated anybody who is associated with a herdsman. Because by the insinuation, herdsmen are second category of human beings, which is not true. But there's a second fallacy. The second fallacy is that all Northerners have free education, forgetting that our visionary founding leader, Dr. Nkwame Nkrumah, understood when we were getting into independence, when the British wanted to create the Northern Education Trust Fund. It was because the British colonial administration recognized that since the Northerners were the migrant labor to the industries in the South, education as a colonial administrative policy was never encouraged and supported. And that they were living in Ghana in which there was going to be a divide which would then lead to exclusion between the North and the South. So what the colonial administration wanted to do was to accelerate the investments in infrastructure and quality education in the North. So they created the Northern Education Trust Fund. Dr. Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah said, thank you very much. You leave that to me. Because for me, it's not just about accelerating education in the North, it's also about building national unity, which is my preoccupation. And that is why Nkrumah then reframed the policy and took whatever was to be part of that trust fund, including new funding, to invest through the whole country. That's why if today you go to Buku Secondary School or Navrongo Secondary School, the same architecture of the buildings you see in administration is the same architecture you see in Ya Asantua Secondary School or any school down south. And then we aggregated who then qualifies for scholarship. And since there were scholarship schemes already, whether they were COCO scholarships, we then had local councils also awarding scholarships. People don't know the history, so they simply try to denigrate a society by making it look like they had everything free. And I'll tell you that as somebody from the North, there's a certain dignity in the person that says, even if you have to split wood to survive, it is better you work to survive than to have everything free. I will move now to my conclusion because my time is up. I would advocate that when we are in political office, we adopt the policy of continuation. The National Democratic Congress left policies such as community policing. What community policing does is not just because of the term, but it's the cultivation of relationships between the police and the civilians in particular communities. That enhances what kind of intelligence you get. Because with that friendship, people are going to tell you what is likely going to happen that you can use to prevent, rather than waiting for a crime to be committed. That policy has not been given the right level of attention. There was the police visibility scheme, in which at advantage places that the police themselves identified, you make sure their visibility is there for everybody to see. There is the need for efficient communication and updating of the public. For example, last week, we are all reading that up to 426 pistols and ammunition have been imported illegally in the way they've been concealed in different compartments of a container. Then we are told 5 people were arrested. Who are the 5? What has happened since they were arrested? Then there is the further rumor that some people were making phone calls and trying to get them released. Who are those trying to release them? And that example can go to all investigations of murder and serious crimes. The public don't know what is happening. And when you hear that investigations have started, that is the end. We must change that attitude. We must make sure that policing is the 21st century policing. We must work collectively to ensure there is no political interference in the work of the police. But at the same time, the police hierarchy must demonstrate to Ghanaians that when there is political interference, professionally, they will stand against it. It's not enough to say that there is political interference, but the police themselves are the ones facilitating the interference. Did they tell us about the interference and the public did not support them? How are they courageous to stand against political interference? So that the blame is not only just on the police, but it's on everybody. And that's a true technocrat. A technocrat is somebody who believes in the policy and will defend that policy even in front of the politician who wants to interfere. In my conclusion, therefore, if we address these structural issues at the root, then we facilitate how we deal with the physical, and we then improve. And we cannot do this without carrying the people along, and that it is when the people feel confident in how security is coordinated, can we then begin to talk about the improvements in the security sector. Thank you so much.
Well. We've just heard that brilliant exposition on the insecurity, the situation of insecurity in Ghana now. And the presenter was Mr. Emmanuel Bombande, somebody that all of us have known over a very long period as a peace advocate. Now, for those of you in the studio, those of you at home, and those of you who are following us on Facebook, on other platforms, please think about this. Ghana has a total population of 30 million, estimated population of 30 million people. The total police force we have is 30,000 people. And then we have 275 members of parliament. Now, because one parliamentarian has been killed, and that is very sad, very, very sad indeed, and all of us extend our condolences to the family, it should never have happened, and so on. One parliamentarian has been killed. The Ministry of Interior has now decided that immediately they are making 200 police personnel available to protect 200 members of parliament, because 75 of them already have police guards. And that by January, Parliament would have as many as 1,000 police personnel protecting 275 people. Now, what does that mean? The number of policemen, police personnel, who protect 1 million people are being diverted to protect 275 people. Because for every million people, there are 1,000 policemen. You understand? Now, 275 people feel threatened. So the policemen who would have otherwise protected 1 million people will now focus their attention on protecting 275 people. Think about it. This is the time when we are going to engage our studio audience first. And then for those of you at home, you can send us your messages on Facebook and also on the WhatsApp platform. So studio audience, those who want to ask questions, those who want to make comments and so on, please put up your hand and we would call you. Anybody ready to make a comment, ask a question, anything? So I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. So we'll do that in that order. We don't have a lot of time, so please try and limit your comments and questions to only 2 minutes. We are starting with you, madam.
Mine is a question, and it boils down to the sectionist group in the Western Togoland. And in your opinion, what do you think government should do, or the country should do to nip this problem in the bud, so that all actors at play will be satisfied? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring listening to you, and I largely agree with you when you spoke about the structural nature of our security, except to say that it was presented in very complicated language that clouded the class nature of security. My view is that insecurity and violence are not spontaneous, and that they are a direct, intentional instrument of the cohesive nature of the state, leached out on ordinary people because we have not been able to handle the material conditions of our people, and that there are a lot of other forms of insecurity. People are dying out of hunger. People are dying. There are serious problems with unemployment. There are wars. There are hybrid wars these days, and all these things form part of the state's, cohesive nature. It is very instructive to say that even the working class people who have been appointed at the level of police are themselves, subjects of class exploitation. That the security services themselves are part of the majority of the population whose material conditions themselves are nothing to write home about. Yeah. So what the ruling class do is to exploit their own, living conditions. And now this number of police people that have been deployed to take care of these 200 members of parliament, what we are essentially saying is that these 200 policemen are those who deserve to go and die, rather than the members of parliament. So we are protecting a certain class of citizens, and that is where I find a problem with that security in itself. We must look at it and look at the class nature that is involved. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Emmanuel. I just want to make a short comment. They say in every institution or every state is based on its security. If the security is very weak, then that means that environment is really, really weak. We can see that in our country, the security is failed. And if I can recall very clearly, within last year, from July to August, within a space of 1 month, 5 policemen were shot dead. If I can recall correctly. So that means the police itself are not protected. They can't protect themselves. How much more the citizen of this country? So for us, to my view, if we really want to have a strong security force within this country, then our current security structure is still based on the colonial era security. Then it must be dissolved and recreate a new security system whereby every Ghanaian after SHS you'll be placed to a security training, and whereby your performance will rather redirect you for where you're supposed to be placed. Because currently our security is a total failure, and it's not protecting themselves, the security itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In your submission, you made mention of types of insecurity, and I could see you emphasize on the fact that we should really look at the systematic and then the structural. If I may ask, at the structural level, kind of advice, or what do you think can be done? That should be the way, because you spoke about root. So if you really want to uproot the entire tree, what can be done? What do you think we can do to really put a stop to it and uproot the entire tree? Thank you.
Good evening and thank you. I would want to say that the best form of security emanates from the people. So if the structure is going to work, it is going to work because the people are satisfied. If you monitor the news, you realize that some of the countries, their politicians walk through the street without any security guard or without any fear. They don't even sit in Land Cruisers. Some use bicycles. Why? Because there is some level of trust with the people. The people at some level are satisfied. So if our system is not going to put in place measures that will calm the nerves of the people and make them satisfied to a certain level, then this is what we are going to face. Now, this security, the increase in number of security men at the Parliament House that they are promising, what is going to happen is that a lot of political policing is going to come in. And in IT, we have something we call garbage in, garbage out. So people are going for security training 1 week, 2 weeks, just a day, they wear security uniforms and they are considered as security people. The threat is even becoming bigger than it is now. It is about time government and agencies set up and decide that, look, we are seen as a model, but the ordinary people down there, the working class, need to be satisfied to some level. When they are satisfied, it won't be easy for someone to rise within them to say that I'm going to commit a crime. Because by the time you rise, the people themselves will stop you. That is the best form of security. That is what I want to say. Thank you.
I think that security isn't something that should be toyed with at all. Because in every given state or society, if the collective security of the citizenry is toyed with and there is undue interference politically, then it means that the state can cripple at any time. I would even go beyond the shores of Ghana. If you take West Africa, for instance, the Sahel region, we have a situation where terrorism and extremism has further deteriorated security in that portion of West Africa. And you can even cite the army takeover in Mali as a critical example. When you come down to Ghana, I think that our security system has suffered a setback because of undue political interference. As a security analyst, do you think it will be fitting and proper for appointments to certain sensitive security positions to be devoid of political interference? In this instance, I'm making reference to appointment of the Inspector General of Police and other heads of the law enforcement agencies.
God bless our homeland Ghana and make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and of right. How many of us are ready as a people that do not have any power at all except for the fact that we are just citizens, would want to contribute to the state, to the positive nature of the state of security in this country? Just as my predecessor says, it must start from us, the ordinary people. We should show readiness, that we are ready to fight the system, to make sure that the right things are done, to ensure that people that are just given the chance, because some government has come into power and given them appointment to direct and authorize around unduly and wrongfully people who are technocrats, people that have been on the job of security in this country and have experienced the tactics and strategies of making sure that this country is what it is as far as positive security maintenance is concerned. And we don't just allow them to be there and do whatever they like because there's some little guy that has been appointed who has decided to be tossing them around. The last time I got to engage with some few officers somewhere towards the borders, it was shameful. Some of the things, the revelations that came out. I said, Master, you have just been recruited. What contribution have you got to make? I said, oh, I have no contribution to make except that I will have to be forced to follow what my bosses say I follow. And I say, what is it that your bosses have for us as far as security is concerned? He said, okay, my bosses have for us all what the politicians think
they should do. Why can't we be like Andrew Awuno once we get a chance to be security leaders in this country? If you fear to be transferred from Greater Accra to some village somewhere far away, and because of that you decide, oh, okay, let me just keep quiet and let people suffer. One day, when the state of security gets broken, you won't be left out. Let us put these things in our heads and all plead and cry in our hearts and contribute to the survival of the people as far as security is concerned. Thank you.
Well, the messages are pouring in, and unfortunately we are not going to be able to read all the messages. There are so many that we cannot read all of them. This message is from Adam from Tamale, and Adam said, we are in bad business and it's only God who can save us. Adam says that it's only God who can save us. And Adam says that we bargained for it. This one is from Bedu in the Tyne district. And Bedu says, good evening, great host. Pursuant to great analysis, your program has indeed made me thoughtful about this government. We, the youth, will pay them back painfully. And this is from Edu Jemfi at Bedu in the Tyne district. Edu Jemfi at Bedu in the Tyne district. This one says, it's good for an MP to have a bodyguard, but we shouldn't forget that nowadays some of the robbery cases have involved some police people. To me, their safety is in the hands of God. The police service, as we now know it, the recruitment is bad. Long live. And this is from James from Kumasi. James from Kumasi. This one says, hi there. As for the issue of security in Ghana, let's forget about it. The entire security system is highly hijacked and politicized in a manner that one no longer trusts them, so as to entrust his or her life into their hands. The NPP has infiltrated and inundated the security services with their invisible forces. And so, what they are doing now is the bidding of the NPP. May God help Ghana so we can rescue ourselves from this ancient gorillas. And this is from Tom, from Doma Ahinkro in the Bono region. Tom from Doma Ahinkro in the Bono region. This is from Kunedu Yadom, Nana Ohiniba Kunedu Yadom, from Old Tafo in Kumasi. And it's good evening, comrades. For the people to have trust in the security, the Constitution should be amended so that the appointment of the IGP, Chief of Defence Staff, Chief Justice, and the security inclined one should be by passing through the rank or find appropriate body to do so they can do their work without fear of losing it. And this is from Kunedu Yadom. Yadom Nana Ohiniba Kunedu from Otafo in Kumasi. This is from Eddie. And Eddie simply says the Nigerian citizens in Ghana have their shops closed. There's an insecurity to the state of Ghana. These Nigerians have to leave. Some of them can engage in all kinds of evil acts to survive. National security must wake up. And this is from Eddie. This is from Haruna Bawa from Bolgatanga. And Haruna Bawa says, good evening. The insecurity in Ghana now is the worst insecurity we have ever witnessed in the history of Ghana. But we must all blame the government of the day. Why? Because if you give a drum to a fool, you dance foolishly. This one says, good evening, comrades. In as much as we look at our security forces, he says that we should take a look at the recruitment of our security forces because that is the root cause of the insecurity. And this is from Charles Dakora from Tamale. Charles Dakora from Tamale. This one says, look at the number of people who have been murdered and nobody has been brought to book under the leadership of President Akufo-Addo. Security has broken. There is injustice in our judiciary. If the president cannot protect us, we will protect ourselves. And there's no name. Wow. And then more messages. This one says, good evening. In fact, the security situation is fast deteriorating and is getting worse day in and day out. Ghanaians were actually warned by the likes of Kofi Kumsin, but we took it lightly. Today, the chickens have come home to roost. And this is from Stephen Beidou, all the way from Moray. Stephen Beidou from Moray. This is from Midodu, Accra, Newtown. So the security situation in the country now is due to manipulation of the head of the security forces with party people who knew virtually nothing or very little about security. This is Nidodu from Accra, Newtown. It says, good evening, Pan-African Television. Please, our leaders have failed us. The main solution to our security problems is for us to prosecute corrupt leaders, and if there need be, we should arrest them so that the national cake can be disbursed equally. There's some Emma from Abekala Paz. It says the problem of insecurity in our beloved country has to do with political interference. And time is running shorter and shorter and shorter. We now have 5 minutes to come to the end of the program. It says our security system is entirely weak. This is so because people now are recruited into the services based on their political affiliation through what we call protocol, but not by merits. And this is from Barnabas Kwedo Okejiri from Grubi in the Oti region. I switch very quickly to the Facebook platform. And this one says, this is from Juliana Belinda Lamte Ubiri. And Juliana Belinda Lamte Ubiri says she's watching from the UK. This one says, I am watching live from Jedua Kesi in the Amenfi Central District. Wow, this one is a very strange message. It's a message from Boozy Bethel. And Boozy Bethel says, vote for John and Jane for peace. And many more messages. Akumia Michael says, we are watching you from Stockholm in Sweden. This one says, peace is a key to every nation's development and advance. No name. Good evening, Pat. We all knew what the MPP and their judges would do. It is sad that justice no longer is a meaningful word in our judiciary. We have completely lost faith in our judiciary, and we urge JDM to dissolve this judiciary and let's reconstitute the judiciary. I'm very sad that they have vindicated Kelvin Taylor and so on. There are so many messages, we simply can't read all of them. So, viewers, audience, at this stage we'd like to invite Mr. Bombande to spend 3 minutes to round up.
Thank you so much. Our time has run out because the topic has been very engaging. Very quickly, let me address the questions that were put by you in the audience. So the first question was on the question of the secessionist groups. My direct and simple response is, all of us agree that there is no just cause for their agitation, and that they tried to create a narrative, and that narrative is a strange narrative. So across the country, all the people, together with our chiefs, have agreed that their narrative is wrong. What it now means is they are embarking on the destabilization of our country. And so it squarely now rests that we must defend the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ghana. And that is in the hands of the Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, which is the President of the Republic, and the Ghana Armed Forces. That's what they were trained to do. They have been contributing to peace in many countries. I've met many of them in many countries. They are respected and they are professional, and they cannot allow anybody to destabilize their own. And so straight away, that will be my response. My second is the question that was related to the role of the state. And it connects very beautifully with the comment that security starts with us as the ordinary citizen. And I totally agree with you. Our awareness, our sense of responsibility, because our rights are also determined by the level of our responsibilities. So we cannot talk about civic rights without talking about the responsibility of Ghanaians. But having said that, the people we elect in the office, to office to govern, they must ensure that the responsibility of the state to protect all Ghanaians at all times is done without any compromise. Because the people of Ghana, through various means, including the taxes we pay, whether direct or indirect, ensure that those who are governing adopt the right policies and give the right oversight and spend the resources in such a way that we can be able to see that type of security. And that's why at all times, security also requires honesty and integrity. And it can never be subjected to partisan politics. And those who try to make it partisan, they don't know what they are doing to themselves. Let me give an example. I don't know whether I'm the only one who will recall, but I'm sure you recall there was even a statement that helicopters were already procured for the Ghana Police Service. And that very soon, police providing security is so going to be elevated and enhanced, because the Ghana Police Service would even have helicopters. Where are the helicopters? In security, you don't make a claim that you know you will not fulfill, because then it becomes deceptive to the people, and that in itself erodes the confidence in security. Then the third one is this, the level of structures. Let me not belabor that. You beautifully said it, but when you address the structural issues, what does it tell us? Security is a continuous process, and you improve each time you go along. That's why it cannot be partisan. It has to be transformational. All of you talked about the professionalism, and you talked about it from recruitment, and that would lead us to the very important point. Social justice must happen. You see, even if all of us do not have what it requires at the same time, but we have a sense that there is social justice. For example, I'm older than my brother here in the front. If he can be assured that if he works hard, as I'm working hard, he too would be able to rise up and get for himself and his family what is due him, he will be relaxed. But when the system is such that he feels that it doesn't matter whatever he does on earth, he will remain where he is, there is no social mobility to climb, then there will be a problem. And that for me is the issue. So there are young people at the age of 35 who want to own 3 beautiful houses in different locations. They want to buy the latest model of the car that just came out, but they've not worked in their life. How could they afford that? It is through illegal means in which there is no justice, and the security system will respond to that. So this is the response I will make. And my last point to conclude: the appointment of the IGP must begin with the level of promotions upwards, so that promotions too must be transparent. But I agree with those who say that we have, for example, at the hierarchy, we have the commissioners and we have the deputy commissioners. What prevents a system that can, if you call it, shortlist up to about 5, both inclusive of gender, and the 5 then can be submitted to professional interview on live television, and the people of Ghana would watch how the interview went and who then was selected as the IGP. Some countries who went through turmoil, like Kenya, have adopted those models. Sometimes in Ghana, it's like we want to wait until catastrophe before we reform. So we need reforms in the security sector, and the people must be confident that those who protect them are genuinely the ones with the required talent, professionalism, skills, and transparency to do so. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, once again, and all too soon, we've come to the end of another edition of Wednesday Palaver. And we were listening to Mr. Emmanuel Bombande, a peace activist over many, many years. And we're talking about the state of insecurity in the country. We'd like to say a very big thank you to those of you in the studio who made it possible for this program to take place. But more importantly, we want to say a very, very big thank you to those of you at home who keep your dial on Pan-African television all the time. We are especially grateful to the people of Tamale, Bolga, Navrongo, Wa, and so on, who have made Pan-African television their station of choice. We thank you all very, very, very much for joining us on this program. We'd like to thank those of you who joined us on YouTube. We'd like to thank those of you who joined us on Facebook. And we'd like to thank all of you who sent us messages. Until we meet again next week, it's goodbye from Pan-African Television, from the producers of the show, Roseanne and Loretta, and also from the director of the show, Adam Lumo, from the cameraman, from makeup artists, from everybody. It's bye-bye until we meet again next year for another edition, next week for another edition of Wednesday Palaver. Bye-bye.